Hello and welcome to a comparison between The End is Nigh, released summer 2017, and Celeste, released early 2018. Both games are platformers released eventually on all current leading console platforms and PC, and have so many similarities yet so many nuanced differences that even if I don't know what I'm trying to achieve by putting the two side by side like I'll do in this video, I'm sure this will be a very interesting look at two of my favorite games of all time that I won't hesitate to also call two of the best platformers of all time. If you don't know, I talked in length about these two games in the past already. I have a critique of Celeste where I go in detail over both what I loved and what I disliked about that game, and I have a pretty different video about The End is Nigh, talking more about the game's public image and cult classic following. It might be less to your liking, but I'm still happy with that video. I also recommend playing both games before watching this video, at least until you reach their credits. I will not really go into the story of either game, but I will have a segment talking about how those stories manifest into the worlds and levels. This video will also go over the structure and post-credits features, so if that's an aspect you want secret in your games, obviously don't watch this video. Oh, and I sometimes swear, so don't let your mom hear this. With all that out of the way, let us begin by looking at the level flow of both games. Both games take what was referred to by countless critics, as well as me, as the Meat Boy approach to individual rooms they offer. This, in effect, is to oppose them to the Super Mario Bros. Series or the Donkey Kong Country games, in which you go through long levels with scarce checkpoints to come back to when you die, but to compensate, levels are less constantly demanding and allow more simple challenge development and assumes little failure until later parts of a stage. This makes those games have higher risk the more you go through a base stage, because you'll have to replay all the easy bits if you lose too much on the later portions of the game. At least that's how I perceive the early levels of those games, since I just kinda lose interest at that point in them, personally. Now, the Meat Boy approach is the kind of games I can get into because they're easier for people like me, idiots. I, a dumb, am known to miss jumps and throw myself at an obstacle much more than I like planning my approach carefully, or whatever kids these days call fun. Super Meat Boy was seen as innovative for its removal of the wretched lives system of the previously mentioned platformers and cut levels into individual challenges of varying length, and respawn you almost instantly back at the challenge's start point when you lose. There's no hit points or second chances in any game of this genre. If you hit your obstacle, it's back to the beginning of the room. Celeste and The End is Nigh operate in the same way in this regard, where every time you die in the level somewhere, you're sent back to where you came from. Both games also make a generational leap from 2010 Super Meat Boy by not cutting the levels up using a dry world map that, while it allowed that game's levels to make massive logical and environmental gaps for variety between levels, both games here are formed of coherent, realistically adjacent rooms as opposed to contextually kinda related levels. The switch from levels to rooms improves the, dare I say, immersion of the presented worlds and makes the experience of exploring them a lot more grounded and personal. And when I mentioned earlier how Super Meat Boy respawns the player at the beginning of each level when you die, both games also adapt this idea along with the world cohesion that rooms allow by making the respawn point dynamic, becoming wherever you enter that room from, whether it be the start from the last room or coming back through the next room's back. Both games let you approach the room from any side you already successfully reached. I'm not going to talk about secret rooms just yet, but just so I don't have to come back to this small detail about respawns, secret entrances or exits are also usable for making new respawn points in this manner in both games. Off to small collectibles. These are also found in Super Meat Boy in the form of bandages and presented as tumors in The End is Nigh and as strawberries in Celeste. In all games mentioned, these small collectibles can be found either floating in open space along the level's layout, or behind some form of hidden wall, tasking the player to change their approach and add an extra layer of challenge to what might be a simple challenge if not for these collectibles. While The End is Nigh retained the same basic logic for Meat Boy and how to lock in the collectible, where getting the collectible isn't all you have to do, you also have to finish the room or level to truly add it to your collection, the rooms of The End is Nigh allow some creative flexibility in how you can lock in the tumor. You can use any exit or entrance to make a new respawn point and also lock in your collectible. Adding some nuance and room for player expression, Meat Boy didn't have in this regard, so you can either push ahead to the unknown remaining part of the level and then keep going, or try and go back to where you came from for the tumor, but then beat the level again, just this time without the reroute for the tumor. Celeste takes things a little differently, where you have to step on a safe ground for a tiny window of time, 9 frames I think, in order to lock in a strawberry. While this might sound more demanding, this actually opens the level to player expression in a new way, where they need to think ahead and choose where to land with the strawberry when it's in a dangerous spot along the level. They can try and retrace their steps back to the start, or to any safe platform they know they can rely on, or push onward with the level and need to get the strawberry again if they die. Both games have the same basic logic behind them, with The End is Nigh being more freeform and creative, and Celeste being more straightforward, but thanks to that it can be more demanding at times. Although the difference in this aspect between the two games is very minor, it's just a tad more secretly guided in the latter, which is something I think we'll see happen more than once in this comparison. I was planning to maybe talk about progression for the worlds and chapters now, but secrets are so closely related to the rooms and small collectibles topic that it's only fair that I talk about them now. Both games feature extra rooms outside of the main path of each world, which are optional challenges that reward you with extra collectibles. Before I even talk about these rooms, there's a notable difference between the two games in the form of what these rewards even are. Celeste has strawberries in the mass majority of its secret rooms. These strawberries are equal in value to the main level strawberries, and are equally worth looking for, even if they are harder to find and within the levels. They're usually more difficult than whatever level you went off the path to reach these for. The exception is some secret rooms that lead to beat block challenges that are a metronomic adaptation of the current world's mechanics and music, that at the end reward with a cassette tape and unlocks a B-side of the respective world. There's a notable distinction between the two. Strawberry secret rooms that are equal in tone to the rooms on the main path, but a shift that notes something extra and really unique is happening make the cassette collection distinct, so I don't know, I like that. The End is Nigh has different things in its secret rooms. They're consistently harder to find than the ones in any other game I mentioned so far, and thus they lead to very different rewards. Mega tumors, which are by definition worth as much as 5 regular tumors. They have the same collection criteria as tumors, where you have to reach an exit to lock them into your collection, but they're almost always behind a challenge within the room they're in, usually advancing a good bit on the current world's original ideas and demanding even more planning and understanding of those mechanics from the player. There are instances where the mega tumors are handed for free, but that's because sometimes just getting to their secret room was the challenge, either because of how hidden or how hard it is to reach. And just like the other game, there's one secret room in every world that hides another type of collectible, this time being cartridges. Yeah, this is one of the better accidental similarities between the two games, how one has cartridges and the other has cassettes. I enjoy that aspect. Anyway, these cartridges unlock a set of levels to play in their own cartridge hub that's accessible from the world selection list, just like the B-side cartridges. However, they feel like less of a focus in the game. The cartridges aren't collected any differently than any Megatumor secret. In fact, they're easier to collect, since once you touch the floating cartridge, it's yours forever, removing a slight element of strategy that's apparent with the other stuff. And that's the case with cassettes as well, but those had the distinct beat block challenges, so they're already made pretty different, so it isn't as notable. And even though they're separated in a similar manner, Celeste puts the B-side unlocks from these special collectibles in the main menu from chapter slacks, and frames it clearly as an advancement over the A-side of the chapter. The End is Nigh puts all the cartridges in the same location, a menu in the first world which you can easily warp to, and only upon starting one you can tell that it's an advanced version of its respective world. But you don't see that cartridge's title when you get it, which on one hand makes them less cohesive, but on the other adds a lovely bit of immersion. This is clearly a diversion from the main game, because there's implication that your character has stopped their journey and is sitting down to play this, much like the Pico 8 version of Celeste in Chapter 3. But that's more of a unique instance. The End is Nigh's opening cutscene and major plot revolves 50% on playing games in your home. It makes sense for this character, and I love that personally. I'll expand my thoughts on these B-sides cartridges when I get to extra content, post-game, and whatever I title that section when I get there. I just wanted to look at how you obtain them for now. There's a lot of subtle and debatable substance in that topic, so until I get there, I want to talk about how each game treats an individual world and the difficulty curve as you progress through each chapter, because that's probably the only way I'll have to start talking about each game's ending ever. Both games, but pretty much like every other game, kinda, don't think about this too hard, are separated into chapters or worlds that are distinct in their visuals and mechanics unique to that or are introduced in said set of levels. Differences are pretty interesting between the games though. Celeste prides itself on its unique mechanics per world, and for good reasons. The dream blocks are inseparable from Chapter 2, the golden feathers, angry dudes, and bumpers are at the forefront of every room in Chapter 6, and traffic light blocks are now as iconic to me as power blocks. However, on the complete opposite end of the scale, there's the more natural, more aesthetically cohesive mechanics of The End is Nigh. The mechanics that make each world what it is are just stumbled upon. They are taught to the player gradually, like any good game knows what to do, but you won't think of retrograde as the massive repeating blocks and growing earthscape world. You don't associate Wall of Sorrow with scaling and climbing a mountain until you look back on your journey through it a couple more times, and you don't realize the arid flats are about windstorms swallowing dead beings into them and rocketing them around forever until you really try to look at what the world is. There's an unspoken beautiful narrative to The End is Nigh that makes up for its lack of compelling story as opposed to Celeste. There's no attempt at making the main storyline very interesting, because not every game is about that. It's more about exploring the rich idea of this world, a destroyed society that wasn't at all prepared for reality to end out of nowhere one sunny afternoon. And you're not a survivor of this. You're right after the impact, still seeing the world decay before your eyes, not that long after the end. And this is how the worlds of this game are separated by different areas to explore during the apocalypse. There's a factory run by robots struggling to maintain their cycles without supervision, a mountain of dying birds, a sewer system that gets poisonous as you get closer to more populated areas of the afterworld, a cave system where all the evil of the above is starting to drip down to the bottom, and even an airship seemingly ran by people who were preparing for the end and planning to live above it all, yet affected by the fallout and driven mad above the clouds. There are small ties between worlds, like crashing down from the lowest caves on Earth to the dungeon crypts of Hell Golgotha, or using the floating rock to reach the SS Exodus, but there's less of a tie between chapters aside from the general setting. Due to the story-based nature of Celeste, that game's levels go from one to another a lot smoother. The campfire you set up after the Forsaken City is the same one you wake up in right after in the old site. The Celestial Resort's ending sequence has the background going through the whole night so that the sunrise of the Golden Ridge is a calm after the storm, and after you struggle to escape the depths of the mountain you fell to in Chapter 6, Chapter 7 is a reinvigorated stride back through everywhere you've been to so far since you're at the bottom again, but now determined. So, like I said, both games do a good job at introducing gradually whatever mechanics they add for each world, but how distinctly different each game feels like when doing so is interesting, especially for when mechanics are being combined. Celeste has no issue combining elements from within the chapter, like the wind and soda bubbles in Golden Ridge, but it is hesitant to put things from different chapters next to each other. They do it sometimes, but only on the side. The End is Nigh's more subtle mechanic introduction allow for combining them to feel equally subtle. It's only natural you can now put the lessons together because they're so natural, well, in the first place. This is also a good point to talk about how difficulty scales in both games, and while both are pretty equal in how well they increase the demand as the worlds go on, the End is Nigh's split after the first 3 worlds make it a good bit more unique. When you reach the split, you are welcome to choose between going up and scaling the Wall of Sorrow, to crushing through blocks to the right and also to throw about breakable blocks leading to retrograde, or try going down and there learn about using fast fall to smash through other types of breakable blocks from a height into the hollows. Each of these 3 paths are equal in difficulty, but each offer their own unique teaching in a small way before returning to the longer, more mechanic-heavy worlds they lead to, each path ending with a friend piece. a third of the way to unlocking the second main part of the game. See, Celeste is a lot more straightforward about how it's going to play out. Aside from the Chapter 6 twist of being thrown down from the mountain, it's mostly just a logical progression forward up to the top. Because that's the selling feature of the game. Celeste is a game about climbing a mountain. The End is Nigh is more of a mystery. It had a short development cycle and was revealed very shortly before its full release, and that let the devs make more mysterious twists and turns in how the game plays out. So now, let's talk about the ending of each game, this being the first time the players see the credits and whatnot. It's a little hard to compare the two games now because at this point their structure is widely different. The End is Nigh is a good few worlds longer than Celeste, maybe not in room count but in world number, so while I only call the last world of Celeste the ending, I want to compare it to the last 5 entire worlds of The End is Nigh, which is admittedly really hard and dumb, but consider how long Summit is and maybe this is more justified. Who cares, let's keep going. After going through the entire world of The End is Nigh, the player is sent into Anguish, Gloom, and Blight, 3 20-room worlds that are remixed, harder, hellish versions of the first 3 worlds from the game, The End, the Arid Flats, and Overflow respectively. In these worlds, dying takes up a tumor you've collected along the journey up to this point in what's called the past, since Anguish forward are considered the future in a way. This is a massive change from Celeste. That game has mercy and wants everyone to beat it. It's more accessible, and that's a very good thing. But The End is Nigh shifts in demand in a fascinating way I can't explain, so if you want to truly appreciate how this tumor life system changes the experience in more ways than you probably think, please watch this video by MML's Commentaries for a wonderful look at the game's completion ideals. It's one of my favorite video essays. I'm not exactly sure why, but it's really good. So while that's a really big tone shift that deserves focus, that video does it more justice because instead I want to look at the similarity the two games share here at their end. A rerun through all the areas in a new light, and sticking to the respective themes, The End is Nigh ends the world again and makes this experience a merciless self-slaughter in a search for revenge, or something like that, while Celeste makes its revisit of the mountain set pieces a glorious stride through what was once a place of anxiety and uncertainty, now determined and stronger than ever as they storm up the snowy mountain once again with a new ability. The difference is big, but the core of returning to early settings is interesting to me that both games do in a way, and again, while one keeps it more natural with its themes and such, Celeste wears this revisit proudly with not an ounce of doubt that this is a return to old mechanics in the new double dash mindset, which feels more gamey and clearly a chance to let the design of the mechanics some more room to shine, and not just the next story beat, which is weird considering Celeste is the more story heavy game of the two. But The End is Nigh feels more like a story choice to revisit the old areas than a level design choice. So it isn't surprising that The End is Nigh keeps even its post-game as a secret for those wishing to explore further, while it might be more of an initial surprise to see Celeste pop up after the credits with a new chapter to play. Finding out yourself that there's a little more left after being spat out of the game from the credits is even more surprising, just not immediately. Again, the games aren't equal in accessibility to their content, and that's okay, it gives each one its respective identity and charm. But with that uniqueness, there's an odd similarity that now exists in my head between the two games. I'm struggling to think of how to explain, so it's a bit of a stretch, but let's just see what I can manage. Let's talk about how Celeste and The End is Nigh each handle post-game content and levels. So now is where the two games' more fundamental structure affects them the most, where The End is Nigh is cryptic and secretive, and its post-game content is hidden and an option for the keen explorative player. Celeste is more guiding in this aspect, however, surprisingly more demanding here too. The End is Nigh's post-game content is actually only one world, technically, but that's assuming you actually got all the other collectibles on your main adventure, which is extremely unlikely. There are 222 secrets to find, 165 being tumors found across the main levels you have to venture through to make a friend in the past, and 57 mega tumor hidden rooms, totaling up to 450 acquirable tumor count from the past. Alongside the tumors are the 4 Iron Cart Steven levels, Steven level pairs that is, and 15 cartridges to collect before the game is over, 16 afterwards. Each one of those cards unlocks a retro-style 10-level pack expanding on the ideas from the world it was found in, sometimes with limited lives and mini coin collection challenges within them, like getting 100 rings or beating the cart without dying over 9 times. This adds 50 or so total extra tumors from cartridges. Do the math however you want, the chance you even get to doing all of this content before you're done with the game for the first time is extremely low, and if you did, it's still a rewarding experience because the additional tumors serve as extra lives in the future, and the cartridges add tumors over the original 450 that are needed to unlock the game's final world. Nevermore are the only extra lives you can have in this world. Accessing Nevermore isn't even too intuitive either. You have to initiate the final escape sequence and then jump into the energy ball, and just watch as it drains Ash to pieces tumor by tumor, and only at 450 are you let into the Nevermore. It's one of the best scenes in the game. It's so unique and bizarre, and I don't know, my controller really vibrates, like I didn't know it can go that hard. It's really weird. Yeah, Nevermore reduces your tumor lives by 450, so you're likely to play this world extremely on edge at all time unless you did the cartridges. Celeste takes a more direct yet expansive approach to post-game content. When you finish the main story, your supposedly meaningless strawberry will add up to the final cutscene a bit, and then an extra world appears, the core. This world takes 4 crystal hearts to enter.
Now, at this point in the game, I had collected 85 of 180 strawberries and 0 hearts. I didn't even know these were in the game.
The result of this is that Celeste is more well-paced after the main game in terms of difficulty curve, where I still don't quite know how to approach the End is Nigh's post-game content at all. I beat all 8 A-sides and then all the B-sides, and eventually managed to beat all the C-sides of Celeste. And upon replaying the post-game, I did all those again and again, better every time. And I still haven't beaten every cartridge in the End is Nigh at least once, just because I struggle to find how to even approach how and when to do each one. I've beat the game with all collectibles, but finishing what those collectibles unlock is still well beyond my reach, and I think it's a fault of this lack of guidance. All C-sides are hard as hell, but they build on something you have to learn before them. All cartridges are hard as hell because they introduce mechanics that were too hard for the main game, and just introduce them in the random order you find the cartridges. Yeah, there's an order to find them in the cartridge selection menu, but that doesn't exactly solve everything for me. Now, what was my point in all this? Am I the issue? Is the game's the issue? I'm not sure. I just did the comparison. I did my job in this. Let's just keep going. See, there's an inherent issue to this part of the video as a comparison. They're different as games, it's not the same. The End is Nigh has melancholy rock classical music in a grim post-nuke setting because that's what it has, and Celeste is a snowy uphill march through mountainy ruins because that's what it is, and there's little to no value in exactly contrasting the two. All games have an equal amount of variance in music, standard pair-world themes, more escalated mixes than their future counterparts. It's just that as opposed to The End is Nigh, Celeste has more advanced music layering effects to the music, but that's just a difference that wouldn't necessarily impact the other game positively or negatively. It is a difference. There are like 2 points in presentation worth talking about. Celeste has a strict pixely presentation, and it handles that self-imposed limitation beautifully, but it works against it when combined with the also pixel-perfect screen shake, which I greatly ranted over and still think is bad in my original critique of the game, and I think it disturbs the more precise parts of the game when first playing through it, and makes going for small gaps as a strategy very difficult, since all pixels have to move an entire pixel unit to stick to the grid. It can't shake just a little bit. In contrast, The End is Nigh doesn't have screen shake or pixel limitations. It's vector graphics, baby, and with anti-aliasing turned off like I like my games, you get sharp edges and accurate corners for everything. What you see is where you get, and it's a perfectly predictable experience when knowing the controls, with the major exception of the ending escape where the screen shake is part of the punch, really. You'd think the end of the world would make it harder to get where you want to go. The other difference in presentation is camera scaling. A great point made by Matthew Matosis, originally regarding Axiom Verge and Environmental Station Alpha, is that something a lot of modern games with retro influence forget is that with most 2D games made nowadays, you can render obscenely more on the screen at once than old games could. Celeste doesn't really do anything with this. In fact, it only zooms in during certain story sequences, only to show the same pixels in bigger focus, which I like, but is odd. The End is Nigh changes the camera scale a lot. Almost every level has a different size for your character. It's often gradual, but small secret rooms often have big jumps from a landscape shot to a close-up of your character. It's always beautiful in curvy pixels thanks to the vector rendering, but it's a little weird when noticed, but adds up wonderfully to the overall experience. Again, not that Celeste would strictly benefit from zooming out at any particular points, but it is kinda notable that The End is Nigh utilizes this pretty major aspect of presentation a lot, while still being notably similar to the other game. And I think that's it. The reason for this comparison isn't to settle on a better game, of course. They're both just phenomenal in every aspect and flawed in their own ways, and I really enjoyed finding these differences that also got me to think about parts of these games I never considered when contrasting them with the other, where I did consider those aspects, because for contrast I needed to think about that aspect in both. So yeah, this is the end of the video now. Cool. I really enjoyed making this. I also really enjoyed recording full playthroughs for all of this. I'm not really sure what to do with the footage. I might try and make like a commentary video on one of them. I don't know, I just really enjoyed like recording an entire game. I'm not sure if my hard drive enjoyed it, but I certainly did. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do with the footage now. But yeah, this was really fun to work on. I had this video concept in mind for quite a bit, so I'm really glad I got it to work. I don't know, I enjoyed it. I'm not sure what I got out of it, but it was interesting, I think, maybe, I don't know. Please play The End is Nigh. Please play Celeste. You probably did play Celeste because a lot of people played Celeste, but however, many less people played The End is Nigh, so for those people I say play The End is Nigh. And yeah, I think that's it. Thanks for watching. Maybe next video will be a commentary on a full game, because that idea sparkles to my brain. That means it might be a very long video. So hopefully I think of something more good before I start working on that. Yeah, thanks for watching. I happen to be a Boogs. Goodbye.